Now, the social psychology of love really has been a social psychology of attraction. What makes people find each other attractive? What makes them want to be intimate? What makes them physically desirable to each other? What might lead to a commitment, a decision to make a commitment to make the relationship last? Well, let's start with actually the one that is my favorite. This is competence. Think about other people in your environment. Think about people who are competent. Generally, and think about people who are incompetent. Generally, we are more attracted to people who seem competent to us. Now, that isn't very interesting. And it turns out that's not really the effect. Yes, we're more attracted to people who are competent than people we think are incompetent. But people who are super competent, people who seem competent on all dimensions, they're kind of threatening to us. They don't make us feel so good about ourselves, right? They make us feel a bit diminished by comparison. So what we really like, the kind of person we're really attracted to, is the competent individual who occasionally blunders. And this is called the pratfall effect, that our liking for the competent person grows when they make a mistake, when they do something embarrassing, when they have a failure experience. Okay? You can see this with public figures. Public figures who are viewed as competent, but who pratfall, who make a mistake, sometimes they're even more popular after the mistake. Okay? I think of Bill Clinton when he was president. His popularity at the end of his term, despite what everyone would agree, whether you like Bill Clinton or not, was a big mistake with Monica Lewinsky. His popularity didn't suffer very much. A lot of people in the media would describe him, well, it just shows he's human. He makes mistakes like the rest of us, even though that was a pretty big mistake. Right? And you can see this even with smaller pratfalls. Sometimes public figures are liked even more after their pratfall. Now, the classic experiment, the classic pratfall experiment is just a beautiful one to describe. It's a work of art, so let me tell you a little bit about it. You're in this experiment, you're brought to the lab, and you're listening to a tape recording of interviews with people who are described as possible representatives from your college to appear on a quiz show. You're listening to interviews with possible contestants from Yale who are going to be on College Bowl. You have to decide how much, what you're told is you have to decide who should be chosen to be on College Bowl. And you listen to these interviews. Now, what's interesting is there's two types of people. The nearly perfect person and the mediocre person. The nearly perfect person answered 92% of the questions correctly, admitted modestly to being a member of the campus honor society, was the editor of the yearbook, and ran varsity track. That's the nearly perfect person. The mediocre person answers only 30% of the questions correctly, admits that he has only average grades. He worked on the yearbook as a proofreader, and he tried out for the track team but didn't make it. So you see, they're keeping a lot of the elements consistent, but in one case he's kind of an average performer, and in the other case, nearly perfect. Now, which of these two people do you find more attractive in listening to the tape? So when they ask you questions about which person should be on the quiz show, people say the more competent person, but they also ask questions like, how attractive do you find this person? Now, you're only listening to an audio tape. How attractive do you find this person? And the results are pretty obvious. The competent person is rated as much more attractive, considerably more attractive, than the mediocre person. Okay? If this were the end of the story, though, it would be a kind of boring story, and it's not the end of the story. Now what happens is half of the participants in the experiment who have listened to each of these tapes, you only get to listen to one tape, half of them are assigned to the blunder condition. And what happens in the blunder condition is the tape continues, and what you hear is the clattering of dishes, the person saying, "Oh my goodness, I've spilled coffee all over my new suit." Okay? That's the blunder. That's the pratfall. Now you're asked, who do you find more attractive? And look what happens. Your rating of the attractiveness of the competent person grows even higher. The competent person who blunders, this is the person that I love. Unfortunately, the mediocre person who blunders, you now think is even more mediocre. Right? This is the sad irony in these experiments. The effect works both ways. So the mediocre become even more lowered in your esteem. Aroused due to something else, don't know what that is. It's best if you don't know what that is. Or even if you do, mistakenly misattribute it to physical attraction, romance, intimacy, passion, and commitment. But before I tell you about lab experiments, let me tell you about the most famous field experiment on this idea. We call this the Rickety Bridge experiment, and there's a bridge at the University of British Columbia that crosses a river that runs through campus. And there's actually two bridges. The Rickety Bridge is one that's kind of a rope bridge. It's hundreds of feet above the river. It sways in the breeze. It's only about 3 feet wide. You kind of hold on to it carefully and you cross the river. It's a pretty scary way to cross that river. Has anybody seen this bridge? It's still there. Yes, you know this bridge. Okay. There's another way to cross the river. It's on a low bridge near the water, solid wood planks, nice and wide, hand railings made out of solid wood, and you can cross the bridge that way. So what two investigators at the University of British Columbia did is they simply positioned, once again, an attractive actor or confederate on one side of the bridge. She was a woman, and she met men crossing the bridge. And she would intercept them as they came across the rickety bridge or the low bridge. And she would ask them a few questions and conclude with, "Can you write me a story? You would help me out with my experiment if you just write a little story right now." Then she would collect their story and she would say, "If you have any questions about this experiment, here's my phone number." Actually, this happens when you're in experiments. You get the phone number of the experiment. What happens? Well, the male students who crossed the rickety bridge, they wrote these sexy stories with interesting content, with kind of little bit ribald themes. And the people on the solid bridge, they just wrote pretty boring stories. The people who crossed the rickety bridge were more likely to call her up later and say, "Yeah, I'd like to talk about that experiment I was in. Can we meet at the Starbucks? You drink decaf, don't you?" Right? And the people on the low bridge were much less likely to call her up. Okay? What was going on? Well, this was interpreted as misattributed arousal. On the rickety bridge, you're swaying in the breeze, hundreds of feet above the water. The bridge seems unstable. Maybe you'll make it, maybe you won't. Your heart is beating. Your palms are sweating. You're breathing harder. You meet this person, and she seems more attractive because you're feeling all these things and you attribute it to the attraction. Now, there's a reason why this study is bad science. There's a major flaw in this study. The clue to the flaw is that you can't even call this study an experiment. What's the flaw? Anybody? Yes?
People who would take the rickety bridge might be more likely to be more for adventure.
People who take the rickety bridge might be the kind of people who are more looking for adventure than the people who take the solid bridge. Right. Another way of saying it is there isn't random assignment of the subjects to the two conditions in the study. That's no random assignment. It's not an experiment. By not randomly assigning people to these two conditions, you may be capturing just individual differences in the kind of person who, when there's a perfectly stable, safe, low bridge, says, I don't want to go on that bridge. I want to go on the bridge where I have to risk my life to get to class. And then should it surprise us that that's the kind of person who would call a perfect stranger on the telephone and write a sexy story and give it to them? Right? We're not so surprised. So what we have to do, of course, is take it into the lab and do this in a more systematic way with random assignment. And this is how I want to finish up. So how do you do this in the lab? Well, you can bring people into the lab, and I can present you with a confederate who said, let's say you are all in condition 1, everybody on this side of the room, and I can say to all of you, please wait here. We'll begin the experiment in a moment. While you're waiting, please fill out this form. And the form includes how attracted you are to the experiment, to me. I can do the same thing over here. I can give you the form that asks you to rate how attractive you think I am, and I can give you the same instruction with a crucial difference. Please wait here. We will begin the painful shock experiment in a moment. Please fill out these forms while you wait. What happens? The people who got the painful shock instruction are more likely to find the confederate attractive. Why? Well, they're sitting there thinking about painful shock. It's making their heart beat faster. It's making their palms sweat. It's making them breathe harder, maybe. And even though it's fairly obvious what's doing that, they still misattribute that arousal to, I must be falling in love. In this experiment, male subjects were brought into the lab, and they were asked to look at centerfolds from Playboy magazine. So these are essentially photographs of naked women. And they are wearing headphones that amplify their heartbeat. And they are asked, among other things, how attracted are they to the centerfold photograph that they're looking at. So maybe, I don't remember how many they look at, maybe it's about 10. So these slides are coming up. They've got the headphones on. The headphones are amplifying their heartbeat. And the slides are moving one after another for a few seconds each slide. And they're listening to their heartbeat. Slide 1. Slide 2. Slide 3. Slide 4. Slide 5. Slide 6. And then they're asked, which one did you find most attractive? Which one were you most attracted to? Oh, slide 5. Absolutely. She's the woman I want to marry. Okay? And what has happened is they're using this bodily cue of their heartbeat to infer that that's who they find more attractive. Now here's the twist. They're not actually listening to their heartbeat. They're listening to a tape recording of a heartbeat, and the experimenter is back there with the speed knob, and at random intervals, he just speeds up the tape of their heart and then slows it down again. And it doesn't matter which slide he speeds up the tape of the heartbeat on. That's the one the subject is more likely to think is the person of their dreams, the person they're attracted to. So even you can misattribute real arousal. You can even misattribute phony arousal. Arousal that isn't even coming from your body. It's just being played to you randomly. You can even misattribute that.